Welcome to the Magnus Effect, the show where we talk about ambitious college students and how they're navigating their challenging journey through achieving their goals. Today we're excited to have Hari Parthasarathy with us. Hari is a very active member in the Management, Entrepreneurship, and Technology program here at UC Berkeley, and today we're going to gain a little insight as to how he goes about his day-to-day activities and how he's navigating college and balancing his dreams. So, Hari, welcome to the show.
Hi Magnus, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so just to start things off, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, just to introduce to the audience out there?
Sure, so hey folks, my name is Hari. I'm a bioengineering and business student in the Management Entrepreneurship Technology program. I'm also a freshman, so this is my first year. So really looking forward to seeing myself grow as well.
Awesome, awesome. So, as of right now, what kind of goals are you trying to achieve?
Sure. So I think really when I came into college, I would have said a very different story about what I wanted to do, what my career aspirations were. When I came in, I was very clinically driven. So I was debating whether or not I wanted to go into pre-med, and I definitely wanted to have a very strong medical background. But I think what Berkeley did was it definitely shifted my viewpoints a little bit away from the whole clinical side of things and really to the idea of how do we use business, how do we use technology, and how do we use biology, and how do we really come to the confluence of all three of those ideas. And so I think right now, if you ask me this question, I would say my goals are to really go ahead and engage and make sure that my core competency in the area of biotechnology exists. But further on, in terms of career, going into a firm that really is well established or something that's a little bit less established, but really making an impact in the area of biotechnology, whether that's really, for me, going to be proteomics, genomics, and genetics. And then further on in my life, I hope to somehow transition into venture capital and help make an impact because I think that's really what makes the world a better place at the end of it.
Wow, that sounds like a very ambitious goal, Hari. So, can you tell me a little bit about your involvements around the campus and what those commitments have kind of done for you in terms of reaching these goals?
Sure. So I think really one of the things that I've started to do a lot of is really be a little bit more integrated within the Berkeley's campus in terms of clubs and otherwise. I started doing a lot of consulting clubs because that's essentially a step towards venture capital, right? With venture capital, you're working with 5, 10, 15 different companies, some way more than that, right? And you're really trying to help their business strategy visions and making sure that you really understand what they need and how you can impact them, right? And the best way to do that is through consulting. So I went ahead and joined the MET strategy group, where I'm currently working with a company that is working in the cloud computing space. And so I'm using my own knowledge of cloud computing as well as the integrated resources around campus to really help benefit their company, right? Otherwise, I also like managing and management as well. So I've joined the Berkeley MET student board, where I do a lot for the community. I try to help build out our community, make it more bonded, make it well rounded, help with both social and academic um, related events. And so that's something else that I'm doing. And then on the side, I'm also trying to make sure that I really make sure that that core competency is met. So I've been doing some hobbies that really relate to those goals. So one of the things that I'm doing is I just recently helped publish a paper with NASA in RNA sequencing, and the basic idea around that was to help with understanding the skin as it pertains to space, and how we could maybe go about using the knowledge that we gain from space to help make some really interesting impacts and really interesting pharmaceutical drug delivery and discovery techniques here on Earth. So these are just some of the things that I'm doing next year. I'm planning to also uh, go into research or look for some research opportunities as well.
Wow, that is very cool. Um, yeah, so you have these opportunities lined up that seem to be in line with the research and really understanding having a core competency in your bio side.
Sure.
What made you think that you should have a business side or vice versa? Like, what made you want to tackle both of these interests?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, it's one of those questions that I actually don't quite know the full answer to, right? I think life is brilliant in the fact that sometimes you often go down one path until you realize that another path existed all along. And hindsight is, there's a very famous quote, hindsight is 2020, right? And I think it really struck me as once I got into Berkeley was when I actually went back and realized that my life has been really at the confluence of these two things. And I know I say a lot about the biotech side, but really taking a step back, I think business was definitely in my life. So let me step back here and talk a little bit more about that path, right? I was fortunate enough to grow up here in Silicon Valley, where technology and biotech as well has been very rampant, right? And I was very fortunate enough to go to a good school where we had a research-based class that was very much ingrained in entrepreneurship, in building out business techniques, building out many of the skills necessary to be a good businessman.
Mhm.
And going through that program, I learned a lot about, some of the things that we're learning here on Berkeley's campus, which is a business model canvas or understanding how to do 30-second elevator pitches, how to conduct interviews, right? What really comes in, what is a product market fit? So these were the things that I already kind of had exposure to just going into middle school, which is crazy to think about, but it's one of those things that you really appreciate once you've actually gone through the program, right? And so, having done that, intrinsically, I had this like notion of I want to do something in business. But going into high school, I noticed that really like the other side, the biotech side, took over, especially since coming from a family that had a lot of these struggles and otherwise, it definitely made the biotech side all the more necessary for me, at least from what I felt was a career goal. So I switched and I transitioned and I kind of put the entrepreneurship side to the side and I said, hey, I'm gonna really focus a lot more on the biotech. But even then, like, within my high school robotics team, I found myself doing both engineering and much of the outreach and much of the business. And I helped develop some of our entrepreneurship related work planners that help keep our day-to-day activities in check, help develop strategic plans that we could use to kind of say, hey, we want to reach world championships pretty soon. What can we do to get there, right? And those types of things are very much using business techniques to generate impact in engineering, right? And so what I realized getting into two very prestigious institutions, one here at Cal and one on the East Coast that covets itself as the bioengineering home, what I realized was that one is very clinical, the other is very business and technical. And I found myself gravitating more towards the business side. So I think really ultimately it was more just the ability to kind of recognize that I'm a person who loves to like really add value, but who also loves to like be very strategic, be very visionary, and be very open to trying and building new things. And I think that's something that eventually biotechnology will run out of that ability, and so you really need to understand and embrace that business side.
Very nice, very nice. So you touched on it a little bit about your values
Mhm,
and having known you for a while
mhm.
and having knowing people that have also known you, I think it's absolutely undeniable that you have very strong values
Oh,
and
thank
you're
you.
always looking out for like the best of people, the good of like you're always this like saint that like wants the best for people and always doing good. What makes you so grounded in this like world of it almost seems like it's so hard to be good with like people exploiting other people every day, especially in the business world. You hear it
Mhm.
all the time. All these fraudulent scams,
Yep,
everyone just in them for themselves
yep.
and just absolutely just going about their life in a selfish means.
Mhm.
What powers you to be so good still,
So
despite those circumstances?
that's a good question. I think, it's funny. I watch a lot of movies, and I'm gonna take a very unconventional approach to answering this question, in that so I have two role models, right? One, my parents, and two, I take a lot from movies and just watching them and otherwise. And it's really funny. A lot of Indian movies touch upon corruption and business scandal, and one of the things that I realized is that, hey, I want to be the one businessman. There's never a businessman who's portrayed as being like honest, true, and just like overall a genuinely good person. And like this is something that I've noticed, and this might be a controversial statement, but I've noticed that a lot of the top tier businessmen in the world were successful businessmen, but as people, they were oftentimes complicated. Right, there was a sense of complexity. They weren't always the best people. They oftentimes neglected family. Right, these were things that I looked up to these people, and to me, I was always confused by the fact that these people were never fully like good human beings, right? And I think, and looking at my father, who's someone who I trust very much, and he's always been a role model, he always had a very strong value system. And it was to the point where he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, even in social settings, even when he's meeting the CEO of Google, he just does not do those things, right? And I've always found that very inspiring. And so for me, like seeing these two silos and trying to like find my own voice, I kind of decided, hey, look, as a person, I think first and foremost, if you want to be a businessman, you need to be a good person, right? That those two things are not mutually exclusive, right? If you The only way you can actually build value and help people is if you yourself are a good person. And secondly, as a businessman, as someone who becomes successful in life, you're going to be a role model to countless people. You're going to be impacting the lives of countless people, especially in biotech, where it matters where you're doing life or death. I would rather make an impact than make money, right? And so these types of things are conversations that I've had with myself, where I've realized that the only way to stay grounded and the only way to recognize that at the end of the day, what you're doing is going to make an impact, but what you're doing is going to inspire a next generation, is by doing good in the world. And so I would like to end this question by saying, my dad has this really nice one word summary for what he thinks is one of the many mottos of life. There are two that I would like to end with. One is good, the word good. The first two letters spell G-O, which is go. The last two letters spell O-D, but if you reverse that, it's D-O. So the quote is this: go do good, right? So that one word is something that, I take to heart. The second that he always tells me that I always kind of do is be useful, be kind, and be deep, right? The first two are self-explanatory. It's go do good, right? The last one is really be deep, be genuine, be authentic, right? And all of these things culminate in a value system that, to me, really defines who I am. Without that value system, I don't think I would be able to be quite as grounded, especially in such volatile times. But that value system, to me, really defines a lot of who I want to be and how I want to present myself, especially to my children, to later on in my career, to my colleagues, to my friends, and eventually to the rest of the world as well.
Wow, that is very deep, and I think your dad seems to be like an amazing role model to you. He seems very smart, and I'm glad that you have such strong morals.
Mhm.
Do you think by doing these types of things, do you think you expect other people to return that same behavior?
Never. I think really, for me, it's all, I don't care if other people reciprocate. Honestly, at the end of the day, it's really just a personal choice, right, that I make. And I think my parents always tell me this, but really, this is the type of person that I want to be. I'm still a long ways away, but the type of person that I want to be is that 1-year-old kid who kind of used to go give share my food with the rest of the world, even though like that would eventually mean that I wouldn't have any food in my basket, right? That was a story that my parents used to tell me when I was younger, that I would go around, when I was 1 or 2 years old, when I didn't quite recognize my actions, I would go around with a raisin ball that was solely for me and give it to everyone else in the room and wouldn't take a piece for myself, right? And I never did that for the sole reason of wanting to get attention or wanting to crave attention or anything like that. I did that because that was just the right thing to do, right? I still hold doors open. People say chivalry is dead. I try to like do that only because, it's the right thing to do, right? And in Hinduism, which I practice very, right, there's this notion that, you must do your duty, you must do your dharma, right? And whatever else happens. So for me, I try to do whatever I think is best. Sometimes that's not some of those decisions are regrettable, but eventually life without mistakes is futile, right? So making some mistakes, understanding them, and really trying to make, at the end of the day, the world a better place is my overall goal. And I'm not looking for validation. I'm not looking for other people to kind of say, hey, look, here's applause. If that happens, that happens. But that's just a side effect of my true mission, which is just to be a genuinely good person and just to help as many people as I possibly can.
I love that message. And I think I think it was exactly what you said. I think people need to embrace this more because we tend to stray further and further away from it as the world becomes worse and worse. But
Absolutely.
the more people we have that stand their ground and be good, I feel like could make like a much more lasting impact in the long run. And
Absolutely.
so, uh, making like a small like circle back to the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
the point of this podcast was to kind of like look into the lives of ambitious people and how
Mm-hmm.
they're balancing it with school. So, as someone who's like who has all these like lofty goals, who wants to do good in the world, what role does school play in your life? Do you think this is like something very distracting to you? Do you think it's like not very useful to you? Like, how do you go about your thoughts on having a higher education?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think school is one of those hidden gems. And this is what, I think a lot of people would say, right? The thing with college is it's your playground. You can what you put in it is what you're going to receive, right? So if you put yourself in classes that aren't physically engaging, that you don't really vibe with, then you're not going to get much out of it. But if you put yourself in those classes where you're really taking risks, where you're going beyond, where you're exploring new concepts, right? Like, for example, I'm taking organic chemistry, right? It's coveted to be one of the hardest classes on Berkeley's campus. But it is also quite interesting. You learn a lot. You understand the deep nature of these concepts, and sometimes I'm frustrated. I get angered by the concept and by the material just because I'm not getting it. But really, that is the beauty, that is the journey that you have to take if you're going to want to really understand and implement these within your life, right? So I think school is just one of those things where it's really a place for exploration. It's really a place for, it's like it's a tinkerer's playground is the way I'd put it, right? It's where someone who's curious could generally go and learn as many concepts, as many things as they want, right? And we have clubs, we have decals, we have courses. You, of course, have dabbled in a couple of these as well, right? And really being able to learn, you're never going to get another opportunity for 4 years to be able to go and explore concepts, explore these brilliant different ideas. Once you get into the workforce, and you hit it full steam ahead, right? So being able to be like at Cal or at any institution for that matter is a privilege that we must really recognize it for that, a privilege, right? And so I think school is definitely something that motivates me towards my goals, motivates me to really try to explore different things. I go to a lot of these speaker series, a lot of podcasts, and just listen try to understand and network with people to really get a better understanding of how I could go ahead and implement that in my life as well.
And yeah, I definitely agree with you. I've definitely seen you walk that walk instead of just talking all the time. For those of you who don't know, Hari is probably the hardest working person I've ever met.
Oh, thank you.
He puts in so much effort through things that maybe people would what normal people would may presume as like useless, like English homework assignments or small little projects here and there that practically mean nothing to the average person. But kind of deep going into that, I wanted to ask you, how have how has your trait of like putting this almost annoying amount of effort into everything you do help helped your career or helped your passions, helped you
Sure.
as a person?
Sure. So let me start off by saying two things, right? Before I answer that question officially. The first is I was really inspired to do this more so by two people. One, my grandfather, who used to say, and I always forget this quote or like chop it up, but I know the essence of it, which is anything you do that done well is a very good thing that anyone can tell, right? So basically, what he used to say was that, and he still says, is that you want to do one thing at a time, and you want to do it really well, and you want to do it to the point where even if it's a small thing, right, you feel proud of it. And I think that's something that I've taken. And having read Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, I noticed that, Steve Jobs, the reason he's so renowned and the reason that Apple is so worshipped as a company is because he invested the time and effort into making all parts of the iPhone and all parts of anything that he did beautiful, right? The design inside and out, the layout of the computer, the layout of the chips, the integration software, the complete vertical integration, everything is thought about to the T, right? And so for me, like, I really take inspiration from that. It's something that I'm working towards. But whenever I do a project, whenever I do a written assignment, whenever I'm trying to test take, I try to really make sure that I understand the concepts, that I understand the underlying principles, especially with projects, right? I try to, like, from the color scheme that I use, to the slideshow presentations, to the to the script, to the presentation. Like, for example, I'm gonna take, one thing that we both worked on, which was our Blue Origin presentation. During that presentation, I read 152 pages of space law. I didn't have to. By no means did anyone ask me to. But it was just one of those things that genuinely made me curious. Genuinely was something that I was inspired by, right? And I think that's really the story of my life, in that I've been a very curious kid, right? And the second thing is opportunities. I think they're oftentimes very, very, very underrated,
Mhm.
right? Opportunities don't knock on your door that often. So when they do, capitalize on them. And so I always like to say, I was in the right place at the right time. And that's not me trying to be intentionally be humble. It's just, it's true. And I say that reason being, like, coming into high school, right? I was completely clueless, frankly, about what I wanted to do in life. I knew I had this very strong inclination to do something with biology and do something with technology. That was very, very clear, just based off of my upbringing and otherwise. But really, I wasn't sure what else, right? I didn't know a thing about colleges, save for Stanford and UC Berkeley. And the only thing that I'd heard about them were that they were these, like, insane colleges to get into, and they were like the epitome, the top of the top, the cream of the crop, the, like, top 1% gets into these. And I always looked at them as if, that one picture on Google Images of heaven where there's that sun, there's the clouds, and the overused stock image.
Yes.
I just imagined a big S with a tree in the middle. That was my vision of Stanford, right? And so, I didn't know a thing about all of these. So at the end of my freshman year, I come up to my parents and I'm like, "Hey, I want to do medicine. Like, I want to do something in med tech. I want to do something in healthcare." They were like, okay, we don't know very many people in healthcare, so why don't you go ahead and ask our family dermatologist? Maybe he might know someone.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? He was like, hey, I have 8 weeks over the summer that I'm doing stuff. Why don't you just come in once a week? You can get to meet patients and otherwise. Now, for anyone who doesn't understand the healthcare system in the United States, 15-year-olds and uh, clinics, they don't go together, right? And especially, you won't be able to meet patients. Like, even if you work in a hospital setting, like on the best case, you would be handling reception, right? So, for the fact that I was a 15-year-old, being able to interface with patients, understand their diseases, perform differential diagnoses, which are basically how doctors come from like a large pool of diseases down to the one or two that you might have, right? Being able to perform these as a freshman in high school is like mind blowing, right? And not only that, one thing that I like, going back to that conversation we were having about entrepreneurship and biotechnology, right? You know, one thing that I noticed with him was that he started 2 companies and he had patents, which is very uncommon in the medical space. So I asked him about it and he was like, hey, you know what? Honestly, I didn't do it for the money. I was just interested in finding a cure for eczema. And I noticed a lot of my patients using hand sanitizer on top of their hydrocortisone cream. And I noticed a correlation. Look, again, correlation is not causation. So he said correlation between that and reduced symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, how can I go about making this into a cure? He started a company based off of it, and that's been going very well. And I was like, wow, okay, that's interesting. I never thought that anyone in medicine would really become an entrepreneur and start that.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was going on again, right place, right time, right? I found this nonprofit organization that was helping with robotics for special needs students, and they were primarily using the technology of a startup company that was making robotic technologies with haptic sensors. And so I walked up, I talked to the CEO, and by the end of that conversation, he was like, "Hey, you want to come work for us? You seem like a nice guy. You're very eloquent. Why don't you go ahead and come work for us?" So over the past 4 years, I've done multiple different internships with them. In the research and development space, when they pivoted to a more online-based studio system, I helped champion the bio side of that and otherwise. And now they're working with Google on a very successful project to help educate students all across the globe, right? And that, again, right place, right time, you would have never thought. And the last example I'm going to do, because I've realized that I'm talking a little too much here, is, I was looking for an internship just at the cusp of when COVID started, right? It was the fall of 2020, I believe, and I was looking for internships, and I wanted something for the summer, but my dad was like, "Hey, why don't we go to this, like, I'm meeting with this guy, and his wife works at NASA, and she'd been saying for a really long time that she wanted to do something in the biosciences, but never had anyone who could pick up the slack for that specific job and kind of champion it."
Yeah.
So she was looking for that role, and and he was like, "Hari, would you be interested in working at NASA?" And it was very funny. That conversation, I basically told him, "NASA? I don't think I can even handle a startup, much less NASA. Like, what am I gonna do?" Right? Turns out, a couple calls later and a interview later, got the job.
Amazing.
And I was like, "Oh shoot, I'm actually doing this, like, NASA, this is crazy." I still remember I got the job opportunity, but I didn't know anything about systems thinking. The first week I came to my dad going, "Hey, I don't understand this. This is PhD level stuff. Like, what am I supposed to do?" He said, "Hey, look, opportunities knock on your door once. Capitalize on it. You don't have to start with the big leagues. I don't know why you think NASA is like not affordable, like not something that you can do. It is, these are all things that you can do if you put your mind to it, right? And that's where he really said, start small. The decisions you make with doing the small things is what's going to help you become a bigger, better, more successful person. That was advice well said, because the minute I stepped back from that PhD level content and said, okay, I'm going to work my way up. What is systems thinking? What are systems archetypes? How do I go about building networks? Okay, from the networks, how can I translate it? The more I managed to do that, the more interesting this thing got. The more excited I felt. The more I wanted to do stuff in that area. And by the end of it, I had a very successful NASA internal report to show for it. It helped champion other NASA internships. Again, right place, right time, right? Everything compounds. And those small things, right? The small act of me saying, I want to do something at Stanford became, or like with a Stanford dermatologist, became, I got a research paper at NASA. One small step deviated, the entire story would have shifted. If I decided, hey, I wanted to do entrepreneurship in high school, if I decided to go to continue FBLA, if I decided to not take a specific course, if I decided after NASA that I'm done with NASA, I don't want to do anything with them, where would I be here? Right? And that culminated with, I got 3 formidable college offers in Rice University, Johns Hopkins for bioengineering, which, if you don't know, is fairly esteemed for their bioengineering program, and I got Cal. If I'd switched my votes by just 1 point, I'd be in Johns Hopkins, struggling in 33-degree weather, studying bioengineering. I'd be at Rice, and my whole path would have been different. I would have done neuroengineering at Rice. I know that for a fact. I would have probably done something else at Johns Hopkins in the bioengineering space, probably done some clinical research. I would have never thought about the business, right? So ultimately, going back to your question of why I give 110% and how that's helped with my career aspirations, I think really starting small and really developing the skill set of saying, hey, I want to make my bed. I want to do this. I want to, I'm going to start putting a plan for myself. Or even at least if I can just do 10 minutes of work, right? If I can invest just 10 more minutes into planning my course load, if I can invest 10 more minutes into making deep friendships and relationships, if I can go if I can go make 10 minutes to walk from here to the MET space instead of taking my scooter, right? All of these are choices, but at the end of the day, each one of these choices compound. And I'm going to end by saying this is something that was very heavily researched upon and written in a very popular book that Michael Grimes recommended to us, Atomic Habits, where he says that Michael Grimes, for those of you who don't know, is the MET founder and board member, and he really helped champion this program, and he's one of our biggest supporters. He's also the managing director at Morgan Stanley, so he's helped IPO many successful companies, including Facebook, Lyft, Uber, etc. So one of the things that Michael Grimes told me was that Atomic Habits is one of those books that really teaches you a lot, right? And it teaches you, and one of the main things that I always like to cite is this plateau of latent potential, right? Starting small, a lot of people will be like, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you being so nitpicky on the small things, right? And sometimes the results don't show for it, and it just validates their claims, right? Saying, hey, why are you caring so much about the small things? Why do you care so much about your value system? Why not just let loose and take a sip, right? But at the end of the day, it's the plateau of latent potential. Eventually, right, you will go from a stagnant line like this all the way up to a hockey stick. And once you're at that point, no matter who is going on that linear trajectory, it's going to be very hard for them to reach your potential, right? And that was one of the things discussed in that book. So ultimately, that's my very long answer to a very short question.
I think that was an amazing story, and I feel like people tend to underestimate how much small things can compound over time. People forget
Absolutely.
that the people we are today are really just a product of opportunities that we capitalized on over and over again
Yep.
until we reach today. So, as like a final wrap-up question, I wanted to ask you, what would be your advice to people maybe coming into college who are still unsure if they should do it or not, and people that may think that, oh, there are no opportunities around
Hmm.
me, and because there's no opportunities around me, I don't even have the luxury to have the opportunity of college.
Hmm.
What should those types of people do to make sure that they still set themselves up for the best life possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, honestly, I'm probably not the right person to answer this question, but I'll try my best, right? I think really at the end of the day, opportunities are what you make of them, right? There are opportunities everywhere from, and I would actually say opportunity is not the right word here. It's a choice, right? It's a choice to be a good person. It's a choice to pick entrepreneurship and technology. It's a choice to do X, Y, and Z, right? So at the end of the day, are you making that choice? Are you so if there's an opportunities don't just happen naturally, right? It's a choice. Are you gonna be step out there and put yourself out into the world, right? So at the end of the day, I will tell them this, right? Really try to capitalize on those choices. Make the small choices, make the big choices. But knowing how to make those small choices is what's going to help you make those big choices eventually, right? Put yourself out there, right? There's no such thing as you cannot do it. And don't let anyone doubt you. Don't let anyone for 1 second say, hey, you are not perfect. You will never be able to do this. That is a lie. You as a person are capable of doing extraordinary things. But if you doubt yourself, then you're never going to do anything, right? You're just going to push things off over and over and over again until eventually you regret yourself, but you've dug a hole so deep that you can never crawl back out. So what I would tell you folks in the audience who've listened to me for this long and haven't gotten bored, really just go out there and put yourself out there and just champion yourself. Be your biggest supporter. Push yourself. Because at the end of the day, you can make it into a successful college. You can make it into a successful job. You have the ability to do all of these things. And let no one say otherwise. And really just try to make those opportunities. You're going to fail 9 times out of 10. That's okay. That 1 out of 10 time that you succeed, capitalize on it. Move on. Right? Because that is ultimately what leads to the people who are very successful. They've been built on the shoulders of their forefathers. They've been built on the shoulders of the prior successes. No one made it to the top by just an elevator. It was always a rocky road, a broken ladder, a mountain with avalanches, rickety bridges, whatever you see in Indiana Jones adventure movies. But at the end of the day, it's a journey worth living. And so, regardless of whatever happens, savor that moment. Live life a little, because you only live once.
Thank you so much. I think everything you've said today is very valuable, and I really hope the audience got something out of this podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and really appreciate it. Hope everyone in the audience also has a very successful career, and hope they can one day be in this hot seat as well.
Awesome.
But yeah,
That's a
thank
wrap.
you.